Welcome back. You are here with Goldberg. Today I want to talk about the book Asatru, A Native European Spirituality by Stephen McNallen. I read this some months ago, and interesting story for it. When I was first considering buying this book, because it took me a while to get my hands on it, I actually went the route of Essential Asatru by Diana Paxton. And that was like the biggest cringe fest possible. Like, the modern view of pagans is winter solstice, rain dances, everyone's welcome, liberal bullcrap. That's what it essentially boiled down to. There's a section like, and gay guys like this god because he shares their personality traits. Like, okay, thank you very much. And that's why I felt like maybe this book was going to be the same way, and I wasn't particularly enthralled by it. As it turns out, much better written, lots of information, not just on like rituals and beliefs, but also on the history of the religion. Stephen McNallen has been part of the North American pagan movement for I think 30 or 40 years now. He, for a long time, was in charge of the Asatru Folk Assembly. I think he stepped down recently, though. And definitely worth checking out. It's well worth your money, in my opinion. So, as I said, he doesn't just talk about the ritual, what they believe in terms of origin of humans and also the afterlife, but he covers a lot of the history of Europe, which I found fascinating, because if you read European church history in general, obviously the Christians were triumphant, they tend to portray the pagans as being sort of, aloof and not connected to their belief structures, and therefore they caved very easily to this new found, concept of religion. As it turns out, he notes that there were a lot of revolts, specifically based upon people saying, we don't like this new idea, because they had a very strong warrior ethos culture, both men and then the shield maidens, and this was a message of Jesus Christ and tolerance, love, acceptance, turn the other cheek. They said it's completely against what we have been raised to understand, that you die in glorious battle and then you join Odin in his great hall, if you're lucky. So that was definitely one of the best parts of the book, and then of course goes into some of the various factions, how they worship, how they practice, some of the sacrifices they do. That was all very good. He does have some interesting arguments towards more of the mainline Abrahamic and monotheistic points of view. So, of course, they will say, well, one God is superior to the concept of polytheism, right? God should be perfect as opposed to reflecting the traits of individual humans. What he says, though, is that wouldn't it make sense, logically, instead of one God being in charge of the entire earth, particularly as the Abrahamic religions will stipulate, it came out of a particular region, but he's in charge of the entire world, wouldn't it make sense that Japanese have their own gods based upon their background, their ethnic group, their tribe, their culture, Africans have this, Europeans have that, and of course, as he notes, when these Abrahamic faiths were expanding, they weren't telling people, your gods don't exist. They were saying your gods are in a hierarchy and they're inferior to this one true God. So that's interesting, because a lot of people would say nowadays monotheism versus polytheism, strict line, but it wasn't that way in every case back in the day. And of course the result of that is that you have this debate towards universalism or more of a kind of exclusionary ethnocentrism. Interestingly enough, though, even though you'd say, well, that's exclusionary in terms of these traditional pagan beliefs, a lot of Abrahamic or mainline religions are very much ethnocentric. Christianity, to a lesser extent, certainly Judaism is ethnocentric. Islam claims to not be, but initially they were saying that God spoke Arabic, that the Quran was the word of God in Arabic, and they refused to translate it when they were trying to get converts. So that's a pretty bold claim to say the God of the entire universe just happens to speak and write in Arabic because that's where your religion was founded, that general region. So that's an interesting way of looking at it. Obviously, most religions, even the mainline ones, Hinduism, right? A lot of the gods in Hinduism, a lot of the context is based upon the Indian subcontinent, the animals that you'll see, just like in Europe, you'll see certain animals and certain themes, because that was the environment that they experienced. So I think that's an interesting way to look at it. It's a nice way to frame the debate. Now, obviously, you're going to have the detractors, and what's the main complaint about Stephen McNallen? You'll find it online. It's essentially, well, why can't black people worship Odin? And it's like, well, again, you get back to this question of, are you following a belief structure that is about universalism, globalism, welcome everyone, or are you following one that's a little bit more exclusionary? People who have been brought up in that kind of Abrahamic belief structure would find the concept of you are just part of this group, we don't evangelize, we don't bring other people in, they'd find it kind of hostile or dangerous notion. But what he's saying is that, again, if you have a group, a culture, an ethnic coalition that's been formed in a particular region and has passed down those traditions, that makes more sense in the grand scheme of things than everyone across the globe worshiping the same God, considering that most of the people advocating monotheism, it originated in a very specific part of the world, and in some cases, certain parts of the world never even heard about this God until it was brought to them by missionaries. So it's just a nice way of looking at things. If you're interested in theology, you're interested in European history, or just religion in general, I would encourage you to pick it up because it's well worth your time.